Welcome back to The Joy of Vinyl. I'm Rick Coste. I feel it's about time we had a little talk about something I personally have been avoiding, the RIAA equalization curve. I know, it's not very exciting. I mean, it's just a curve. And it's one that a bunch of audio engineers back in the 1950s, maybe even 1954, came up with to address a problem they were fed up with. Back then, the National Association of Broadcasters had all sorts of problems to deal with when it came to recordings. Equalization was all over the place, depending on the source. Amateurs did one thing, while professionals did another. Companies and countries ran the gamut when it came to how recordings were equalized and the curves they used. So let's dive in. I'll see you on the flip side.
I remember an old stereo system that my dad had, and it allowed you to select different EQ settings. And some of those EQ settings, it said something, I think Decca, Columbia, and there were a few others, all because of this very reason that we're talking about. It was a mystery to me at the time, and when I say mystery, it was a boring one. I really didn't care. But that aversion to understanding what it all meant followed me well into adulthood and lasted until, well, I have to be honest, I still don't find it an exciting subject. At least the history part of it and the minutia of the curve itself. Once I see numbers thrown into the explanation like 20 kilohertz, I pretty much tune out. So I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to talk about what I do find fascinating, which is how the RIAA curve solved a problem, what it does, and how it affects us today. The funny thing about all this is the tech is the same. Think about phones. They've changed drastically in the last few decades. They went from dials to touchscreens in less than 30 years, actually. Not so with your turntable setup. Things haven't changed in well over half a century. It's actually kind of cool. So let's start with the problem that those audio engineers of long ago needed to solve. So I'm going to put it this way. Let's consider this scenario. If you created a record without caring anything about equalization, you would immediately notice something was horribly wrong. Even before playing it, you would see a problem. The grooves would be wide, much wider than you're used to, often imposing on its neighbor. I should say groove because it's really just one long groove, but anyway, you get my meaning. Anyway, the playing time or number of songs you could fit on one side would also be severely limited to only a few minutes. If you could play it without the needle jumping all over the place, the sound itself would cause your ears to bleed. It's not that something went wrong mechanically, it's because you didn't apply equalization to it before cutting the lacquer used to produce the record. That equalization needed to be standardized. That was the problem those engineers of long ago needed to solve. That standardization, the one that they came up with, became the RIAA. And RIAA, if you don't remember, I think I've mentioned this in the past, stands for Recording Industry Association of America. So that equalization curve required all records and record players to comply. Now, it's applied when the lacquer is cut, and it's corrected when you listen to the final product. Without the correction, your record would sound horrible. The solution is actually pretty elegant. Remember those wide grooves I mentioned without equalization added to the cutting process? Those are caused by the low-end frequencies, or the bass. The RIA equalization curve is applied to tighten those grooves up and allow for more songs per side. It reduces the bass by 20 decibels and boosts the treble by 20 decibels. When the master lacquer is cut, those grooves are tight and controlled. You can also fit more songs, luckily. So the thing is, when the records are pressed, they retain that equalization curve. If you played them without considering the RIAA curve, the sound would be mostly high-end and pretty noisy. That's because when you boost the treble, you also boost all the surface noise that comes with playback from a vinyl record. That makes for a sound full of hiss and crackle. So now what? Now that you have a record that's full of hiss and crackle, what do? How do you fix that? Well, enter our friend, the preamp. The preamp boosts the signal. but it also inverts it. It adds those 20 decibels back to the bass and reduces the treble by the same. This treble reduction also reduces that annoying surface noise. You can now listen to it as it was meant to be heard.
Those audio engineers were pretty intelligent people. This is also why I say not much has changed. We still apply the RIAA equalization curve today to make records, and preamps correct it during playback. If you were to pluck an engineer out of the mid-1950s and plop him in front of your turntable today, he could tell you what every piece does, but hand him an iPhone and watch his mind explode. So, I hope you found that more interesting than we both thought it might be. And if you enjoy records as much as I do, feel free to subscribe. And if you would like to know when, say, new episodes are released, click the little bell icon down below. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.